afternoon to all the attendees for the second session of our Digital High Tea series. Today we are discussing transfer pricing and regulatory aspects on interest on overdue payments to the group companies. This is the second season. This is the second session that we are handling. Last month we had a session on the key managerial personal's responsibilities, liabilities, and compliance management related topic, which was conducted by my colleague Archita. That's there on our Rodel India page as well as on our LinkedIn page. So in case you have not been able to attend that, you can go there and attend that as well. So today's topic is, as well as I just told you, is on the interest on overdue payments to group companies, and we'll be specifically discussing the transfer pricing and regulatory aspects of that. So let me just first, before doing that, introduce today's speakers. So I'm Rushak Tadkalkar. I'll be one of the speakers and I'll take you through the regulatory aspects of this topic. With me, I have my colleague Preetam Jhala, who is also a chartered accountant and will take you through the transfer pricing regulations of this topic.
Hello, everyone.
So to start with, we will just begin with a brief introduction. I assume most of you already know Rodel & Partner, but just for the new attendees, we will just go through first basically introduction to Rodel & Partner. Then we will go through the regulatory framework under FEMA for imports and export payments, and thereafter regulatory aspects of transfer pricing, and followed by some case studies. In case you have any questions relating to these topics already, you can drop in the chat box section on your right in your GoToWebinar chat, and we will try and address them at the end of the sessions. So with that, I'll begin with the introduction of Rodel & Partner. Today, as most of you are aware, Rodel & Partner is one of a kind firm. We've been established, founded in 1977. As a single practice in Nuremberg. Today, we are 5,120 colleagues in more than 49 countries with wholly owned offices, 109 wholly owned offices. Rodel & Partner is one firm. We don't believe in franchise or network. We are one firm, all of us together in all the countries are Rodel & Partner offices. We, Rodel & Partner, are a one-stop shop for all the legal, tax, regulatory, advisory, audit and BPO related queries, and committed to German internationally active family businesses. Our journey in India. So we started in India in 1997, and Rodel & Partner started focusing on Indian market, started establishing its network over here. In 2007, we founded Rodel & Partner India, first in Delhi. In 2008, we opened Mumbai office. In 2012, Pune branch was opened. And today we have offices now in Bangalore, Chennai, Ahmedabad as well. So we have 6 offices in India with an Indian team dedicated supporting us. We are advising currently for more than 450 multinational companies. We have strength of more than 150 employees in our offices and are having a dedicated India desk in our head office in Nuremberg. As most of you know, in India, local languages, there are a lot of local languages and you need to support on that. So we have communication capabilities on most of these languages, wherever you might be. Rodel & Partner is as international as we are. We are available mostly in all the countries that German companies are doing business. So in any of these countries, if you have any of the queries, problems, need support, please do let us know. This is just a representation on the map. Rodel & Partner is also present in Europe and various other countries. So just we would like you to have an understanding of where all we are present in Europe other than in Germany. In Germany, we are also present in most of the major cities. And this is our basic mantra, how we follow our consulting advisory, interdisciplinary caring principle, international approach, and a very client-oriented approach. So with that, I come directly to the topic, and the topic of regulatory framework. So basically, when we are talking about intercompany payments between parent company, a foreign and Indian subsidiary, a foreign parent company and an Indian subsidiary, the most important regulation that companies need to keep in mind or have to understand is the Foreign Exchange Management Act, popularly known as FEMA. So under FEMA, it's the most restricted regulation in India. We have strict restrictions on outflow and inflow of foreign currency. And therefore, it is very important while you are doing any transactions with your subsidiaries in India that you have basic understanding of FEMA regulations. And with that, we are just giving you a brief idea about how FEMA works, how FEMA is functioning. So basically, if we all see here, Foreign Exchange Management Act is, as I said, is the main act which governs all of these transactions. And under FEMA, the main distinguish is either whether it's a capital account transaction or a current account transaction. So capital account transactions are generally which deal with, say, equity capital or loan, and all these kind of transactions will come under capital account transaction, whereas your usual trading activities would come under your current account transactions. These current account transactions are generally freely available and don't have so many restrictions, whereas capital account transactions have a lot of restrictions. So with today's topic, we will see how import of goods and services and current account transaction rules are governing these transactions. So as we provided, basically import of goods and services will be governed by the Foreign Exchange Management current account transactions rules, section 5, and under FEMA section 7 and 7.3 will rule the capital account transactions. Import regulation. Now the most important import regulations which we need to consider before we jump into the complexities of transfer pricing are that the import related payments need to be settled within 6 months. This is the most important regulation under FEMA, where they say that if you are importing goods, you need to settle the payments within 6 months from the date. And if there are financial difficulties, then they may be allowed, but up to 3 years, then the AD banks have the discretion to allow the payments. Beyond 3 years period, you would require to take an RBI approval. So basically, the point here is the understanding is that India should get their foreign exchange within the time and therefore make the payment as well. So this is the reason where they are saying that similarly they've given even the import related payment should be made out within 6 months. On the question of interest, in case the Indian companies are not able to pay the interest, then there are restrictions on import interest payment even on this delayed payment. Companies cannot charge any rate of interest, as I just said that it is strictly regulated. FEMA foreign exchange payments are strictly regulated. There's a maximum cap of interest which can be charged. The current interest rate that is maximum allowed for penal interest for delayed payments is 2.5% plus LIBOR. Again, even for this penal interest up to 3 years, the AD bank is basically your Indian bank with which your company is working with. They can allow the payments to pass through up to 3 years from the shipment date, post which you would require an RBI approval. So we just need to always consider these payment related topics before we are processing payments for the subsidiaries to the parent company as well. Currently, due to the COVID, the government RBI has been quite gracious and given this extended that deadline to 1 year from 6 months. So these are the basic import regulations. Now for export regulations as well, when you are exporting, it is expected that you receive your repatriation, realization of your money within 9 months from the date of your export. So this is the basic thing that we all need to consider when we are exporting goods, that under FEMA you would require to get in the payment within 3 months, within 9 months from the date of exports. Further, one more important provision that everyone should understand is advance payment. Even advance payment, receiving advance payment from foreign buyers is regulated. So exporters have an obligation to deliver the goods within 1 year from receipt of advance payment. So it is something like you need to also provide the goods within the period. So you cannot use this basic provision is introduced because RBI saw that people were using advance payment as a method of funding their subsidiaries. And so as to regulate that particular point, this provision was introduced, and therefore now you have to actually fulfill your export obligation within 1 year in case you've received the advance payment. Also, it was seen that they were charging interest in cases the advance payments where deliveries were not made. So even to regulate that, RBI has now put in a restriction, which is 1%. So interest cannot exceed 1% plus LIBOR in case of delayed deliveries wherever in export cases. And yes, in case exporter has minimum 3 years of satisfactory track record, AD banks may allow long-term export advances up to say 10 years to be utilized for execution of long-term supply contracts for export of goods, provided in case payment of interest for such long-term advances is not exceeding 2% plus LIBOR. So these are all basic limits which are set in for all these transactions for imports and exports, and needs to be considered. RBI is quite strict with the limits and does not allow in generally to pay the penal interests beyond these limits. So in case companies are charging their subsidiaries say higher interest rates under FEMA, eventually the transactions don't pass through. So you need to be mindful, of course. So that brings to our main topic, how you would have an effect under transfer pricing. And that's where now Preetham will take you to the transfer pricing related.
Thanks, Rishak. Good evening, everyone. I'm Preetham Rajala, and I'm working as a senior consultant in Rudel Partners Transfer Pricing Practice. And I'll take forward this discussion further from a transfer pricing point of view. Today's issue, Rishak, can you see my slide?
No, not yet.
Can you give me control? Just give us. Sorry for the interruption. Yeah, right. So today's issue, which is on interest on overdue payments to group companies, it may sound simpler from a transfer pricing perspective. If I have to compare it to the other complex intra-group transactions which we have to deal with on a regular basis. However, this simple looking issue has been a matter of tax disputes for long, and therefore the way in which I have structured today's presentation is that first I would like to briefly discuss the relevant transfer pricing provisions. Then in the second part, we'll try to understand the intricacies of this transaction and see what the Indian TP regulations basically require from a taxpayer. Then next, we'll discuss the typical transfer pricing issues that you being a taxpayer may be faced with. Then in the next part, we'll discuss the key takeaways that you can rely on. Then at the end, we'll take up certain case study and suggest a possible way forward. So let's start with section 2 of the Income Tax Act, which is also referred as the charging section for TP provisions. Is that an international transaction which has to be between the associated enterprises or AEs, needs to satisfy the arm's length test. You'll notice that there is an important provision which is reference to international transactions. We'll discuss what exactly this term means in the later part of the presentation. Also here, I would specifically like to highlight the text of subsection 3, which provides that any possible transfer pricing adjustment which increases the losses or reduces the income of a taxpayer shall not be made. In essence, what it means is that in this situation, arm's length price or ALP need not be determined for that international transaction. Then there is section 92A of the Act, which provide for definition of AEs, specify that an enterprise which participates in either control, management, or capital of another enterprise would be termed as AEs. Further, it also provides for certain criteria for deemed AE relationship. However, for taking the discussion forward, we'll continue with the assumption that a reference to the transaction henceforth are between AEs only. Then there is section 92B of that, which specify the meaning of international transaction. As I just said, we'll discuss this term in the next part of the presentation. Then there is section 92C of the Act, which provides for a mechanism to compute the ALP of any international transaction. It also provides for comparability factors and other relevant things. Now, coming on to the next slide, let's discuss whether this overdue balances, which could be in the nature of either payables or receivables, can they be covered within the definition of international transaction or not? So, as in general parlance, what we understand that overdue balances arises from the normal transactions which enterprises enter into with either group companies or with the third parties, and which eventually give rise to receivables or payables. Only in case if this outstanding balances are not cleared within the agreed credit period, then only they can be termed as overdue balances, and in commercial sense a penal interest would be generally expected to be recovered from whoever is the non-paying entity. Further, also under exceptional circumstances, this long outstanding balances can often be considered as an indirect way of financing by one company to another, and thus it is under the scope of income tax authorities. Now, coming back to the definition of international transactions, which covers various types of transaction under StempBit and basically can be categorized in 5 different limbs. First limb covers transactions relating to tangible property, which could be in the nature of purchase, sale, transfer, lease, or use. Second limb covers transactions for intangible property. Then fourth limb covers transactions which are in the nature of receipt or provision of services. And last limb covers transactions which can be categorized as a business restructuring or a reorganization kind of arrangement. Now, coming to the third limb, which I intentionally skipped, which is also our today's discussion is centered around. This limb covers the transactions which are in the nature of capital financing and includes borrowing, your lending or guarantees, purchase sale of securities or any type of advance, and payments or deferred payment or receivable or any other debt arising during the course of business. The important thing here to note is that deferred payments or receivables are covered within the inclusive definition of this capital financing related transactions. Now, here is where the controversy starts in transfer pricing. For this part of presentation, what we have tried here is to list down certain common issues which a taxpayer is generally faced with. Here we have also tried to refer to some of the landmark judgments which we feel were relevant to court. And considering that there are no straightforward answers for this selected issues. So therefore, what it provides is an overview as to how the judiciary is interpreting this issue and what view they are adopting. I would also like to make it clear that the topic of this overdue balances and charging and computing notional interest on that by tax authorities is highly litigative, and there are judgments from both the sides, being positive or negative, even though a majority of them are in the favor of taxpayers only. Now, first and foremost issue which comes for discussion is to determine whether overdue balance is an international transaction or not. So therefore, for any transaction to be covered within the purview of transfer pricing regulations, such transaction has to first fall under the definition of international transaction. Therefore, it is also important to refer to section 92B and explanation to that section. What this explanation provides is that international transactions shall include capital financing related transactions, which could be in the nature of borrowing, lending. It also included a reference to payments, deferred payments, or receivable. Thus, this provision makes it clear that overdue balance receivable as such is not explicitly recognized as an international transaction. However, tax authorities try to take an argument that the expression receivable used in this definition would cover the outstanding receivables also. And then they proceed with recharacterizing your overdue balances as some sort of deemed loan or a working capital financing arrangement between you and your AE. Now, to negate this separate transaction argument, it is also important to take reference to Rule 10A of Income Tax Rule. What this rule basically provides is what a expression transaction means. So this rule provides that a transaction includes a number of closely linked transactions, which is also known as principle of aggregation, and it's a well accepted rule for transfer pricing analysis. Essentially, what this principle seeks to achieve is that we shall effectively combine all our functionally similar transactions and then determine the ALP of these transactions by taking them together. Therefore, generally, transactions would be said to be interdependent or are closely linked when they are arising out of each other, and they cannot be separated and should not be analyzed independently. For instance, just assume an Indian entity who is exporting goods or providing services to its foreign group entity, and also it is giving a credit period of 90 days. This entity should have factored the cost of working capital, which would be blocked for 90 days while pricing for these goods or services. In such case, though the sale of goods or services and your allowing credit appears to be two independent transactions, if we analyze them closely, what it would reveal is that transaction of allowing credit is integral to transaction of your sale of either goods or provision of services, and thus allowing a credit and computing interest on that overdue balance shall not be benchmarked separately. Whereas just compare that with the transaction of lending or borrowing money. In that transaction, what we have to determine basically is the arm's length price for the interest that would be paid for that lending or borrowing. Therefore, by using this analogy, there can be no separate transaction of interest if the main transaction itself is of sale of goods or your provision of services. Further, courts have regularly held that early or late realization of your sale proceed is only incidental to your main transaction, which could be sale or services, but not a separate transaction in itself. Also on this aspect, what courts have held is that what needs to be analyzed is the pattern of how you're collecting your receivables. If that pattern indicates that your arrangement is such that your related party shall benefit from this delay, then there is a possibility of categorizing that as either a transaction of lending. Thus, the common principle, what we have decoded from various judgments, is that expression receivable used in this section 92B does not mean that every item of receivable which is arising from your dealings with foreign AEs would be characterized as an international transaction. Further, the courts have observed a delay in collection of money may be due to different reasons, and at best it could require a thorough investigation, which could be on a case-to-case basis. So now all this discussion that I did was from a legal standpoint of view, but it is also important to understand how we can practically deal with this issue of outstanding balances. For this aspect, what we have seen is that there are two equally valid thoughts, and a taxpayer can select any of the suitable approach risk appetite. First approach being, you don't disclose outstanding balances as your international transaction, and this would be done by relying on your legal arguments, which I've just referred about. In my personal capacity, this stand is a bit aggressive because you are not disclosing that transactions of outstanding balances in your Form 3CB. Now, other school of thought, which we also follow for our clients, is that we disclose outstanding balances as an international transaction. This is done with an intention that we have to avoid any penal consequences for non-disclosure. Further, this disclosure in Form 3CB will be accompanied by a standard note in your Form 3CB that outstanding balances have been disclosed just out of caution, and we believe that the same is not a separate transaction. Now coming back to the other issues which would arise in the case where there are overdue balances and on whom interest has been charged or is required to be charged, what should be the arm's length price of that interest? In this regard, currency of your outstanding balances would play an important role. So in case if receivables are in foreign currency, then the ALP shall be in reference to that particular currency. And in most of our cases, that would be LIBOR plus reasonable spread. If the currency of your receivables is in INR or Indian rupees, then we can of course refer to the rates that are going to be charged by Indian banks or expected by Indian banks towards working capital credits. Now let's assume a situation where you have charged interest to your unrelated parties, or your vendors or third parties have charged or recovered interest from you. Then possibly that interest rate can be used as your internal comparable from our arm's length price purpose. And also in reverse situation where no interest has been charged either by you or by third parties from you for this overdue balances, then the same proposition for justifying your non-charging of interest can be made by again calling this as an internal comparable. Now, an important consideration which is required to be taken note here is the maximum interest rate that can be charged by foreign AE as per FEMA regulations. So as Rishak has just discussed on this issue, I'll not repeat again in detail. However, I would like to say that FEMA regulations needs to be closely watched out. From a TP perspective, what ceilings that are prescribed by Reserve Bank of India, we can argue that they can be taken as a benchmark rate, as they are applicable for trade credits allowed by AE or non-AEs, and therefore are also relevant for transfer pricing. However, in case of overdue balance receivables, generally FEMA regulations have not prescribed a maximum ceiling on your interest rate that can be recovered. That is understandable because the basic intention of this regulations was not to put any ceiling on how much interest only you can recover. So again, you have to fall back to what are the industry practices for interest that can be charged on overdue balances receivables. So now the next issue that has been assumed is for a situation where we have an outstanding payable as well as outstanding receivable from the same AE. and the amount of payable in this case is higher. In this case, if the AE has not charged any interest towards its payable, then we will have justifiable ground to not charge interest on your amount receivable also. Here I would like to make it clear that what I am referring to is not the netting of your actual amounts which are payable or receivables. This is from the perspective of charging of interest and netting that off. Because whether you can net off your amount receivable from payable, this is all being guided by FEMA regulations. Issue, which is the interplay of section 92.3. As I had referred in my initial part of the presentation, that section 92.3 requires that transfer pricing provisions are not to be applied. What would be that case? If an TP adjustment is leading to increase in losses or is reducing income of the taxpayer. Therefore, assuming a situation if no interest has been charged by your foreign AE towards outstanding payables, then in that case, TP regulations provide that no notional interest has to be computed, and therefore no TP adjustment can also be made, because that would lead to increasing your losses or would reduce your taxable income. Now on to the next issue of what would be the situation if your profitability which you have arrived after undertaking the benchmarking analysis, and where you can prove that the profit margin what you have earned from your international transactions with, of course, group companies is higher than the arm's length margin of comparable companies. In such case, of course, a plea may be taken that no adverse transfer pricing adjustment is required for this overdue interest. Similarly, this issue will arise for working capital adjustment when we undertake this economic adjustment to our operating margins. So the basic assumption that goes behind undertaking a working capital adjustment is that it would take into account the impact of your receivables on the profitability. And if the pricing or your profitability after making this adjustment is still more than the arm's length margin of your comparable companies, then also we can still argue, of course, with the tax authority, that no adjustment again is required to your outstanding receivables. With respect to application of thin capitalization rules, this was introduced through section 94B under that. So what this provision prescribe is an Indian company or a PE of foreign company are the borrower and they incur any expenditure which can be called as interest or is in the similar nature, and that interest exceed an amount of INR 1 crore. Then the amount of excess interest which would be computed by a given formula so this excess interest shall not be allowed as a deduction, and you have to carry that forward. So now one question here comes up for consideration is that whether interest paid on overdue payables would be covered within the definition of debt or will be covered under thin cap rules. So this point can be further evaluated. However, from the plain reading of the provision, what we can make out is that interest paid on overdue balance payables would be covered under your thin cap rules. However, that situation would be very rare where your interest on overdue payables exceed INR 1 crore. But if that's the case, then you have to be mindful of this. On to the next issue, I mentioned somewhere in the beginning that the primary argument of tax authorities is that you have foregone a notional interest which you might have earned on that balances if you have recovered them early. Even though this may be not a justifiable argument in most of the cases, let's assume a situation where the company who is giving credit proves that it is not earning any income through interest or from any third party advances or from your bank accounts, and it further proves that it's a debt free company and it has not utilized any borrowed funds and then in turn passed on those credit facility to group entity. In such case, non-charging of interest on your outstanding receivables can be defended. So here in this part, what we have summarized is our discussion through some key takeaways. Of course, by relying on the principles which were given in various judgments, by following this, what we feel is that you will be on a stronger ground to justify your stand of either charging or not charging of interest on overdue balances and safeguard yourself from any future litigations or tax disputes. So first key takeaway, what we have highlighted is delay in realization of receivable. From the plain reading of the definition, it seems that it's covered. However, on the basis of the principle, which is coming out from various judicial precedents, that the same is not independent of your main transaction of either selling goods or provision of service, and therefore we can still argue that computing of notional interest is not required. Second is that if you want to prove that no notional interest has to be made to your overdue balances, then you have to undertake a working capital adjustment. And we can show here that the operating margin which you have earned after performing this adjustment is still higher than the arm's length margin of your comparable companies. The third one being what you can follow is a consistent credit policy for all your trade transactions. And there is a delay, then that policy would provide that you have to charge a penal interest. Either that can be from your group companies or third parties. And also you need to document if there are measures which you have taken to recover the amount, because at the later time for assessment stage, that can be helpful. Then fourth key takeaway is that it's important to understand and also the document the prevailing industry practice for which you are also part regarding trade credits. So in case if it can be proved that it's the industry trend to either charge interest of a particular rate or not to charge interest up to a certain credit period from any party, be it may be AE or non-AE, and the same approach you have also followed and your business partners have also followed. That would be very helpful again for the assessment purpose. Now the last key takeaway what we have highlighted is the current situation in which we are in, which is due to COVID-19. So providing excess credit periods has become a norm. Either you can't recover your amount or your AEs are allowing an excess credit period, which is justified considering the economic situation. But here we just have to document what what the excess credit periods are being allowed. Also, we can take help of very recent RBI circular which came up, even Rishak has discussed, where RBI is allowing you an credit period recovery period which was already prescribed in regulations. So even regulators are have been reasonable with this regard. Now, after all the theoretical discussion which we did, it is important to see how we have to apply this theory in real life situation. Therefore, we will discuss certain case studies and we'll see what we can conclude in the given scenarios. Now let's start with the case study 1. The facts of this case study were that there is a ABC India, which is a subsidiary of ABC GmbH, and it has imported goods from its German parent. Now there was a delay in making remittances for this imports, and ABC GmbH is charging an interest at a rate of 4% on this overdue amount. Now we have taken again an assumption that arm's length price of this interest was determined to be at 1.5%.
Yeah.
In this case, yeah, sure.
Yes, in particularly this case, as I mentioned before, under FEMA regulations, you won't be allowed to pay interest beyond 2.5%. So particularly in this case, we had to revise the interest related invoices, and you have to bring it down to 2.5% plus LIBOR. Since currently the LIBOR is in negative for Euro, the Euribor is in negative, the regulation, I mean, the banks, the understanding is that it will be floored at 2.5%. You don't have to go negative. But then in this particular situation, the maximum interest that can be charged to the company will be capped at 2.5%. So while charging these interest as well, I mean, just so that you don't have to then again revise the invoices, you have to be sure that you're not charging beyond 2.5% the interest. Beyond 2.5%, the banks will not allow you, even if you charge that interest invoice is not allowed to be paid out. So that becomes a challenge in such situations, and therefore we have to be mindful of this fact and restrict the interest payment to 2.5%.
Now, along with that, important point here is that even though maximum allowable interest rate, which is 2.5%, is as per RBI regulations, but there is an ALP determination of this interest which has been done, and what it provides is the arm's length price of this interest cannot go beyond 1.5%. So if you still proceed with, or this ABC GmbH proceed with charging an interest rate at 2.5%, it would attract a TP adjustment for this excess amount of 1%. And accordingly, if it's possible, then the rate which ABC GmbH is going to charge shall not exceed 1.5%. On to the case study 2. In this case study, the facts are such that PQR India has an outstanding receivable from PQR GmbH, which is its parent, and this receivable has turned overdue. However, PQR India is not charging any interest on this overdue receivables, for the reason being that PQR GmbH is its biggest customer, and that accounts for almost 90% of turnover. So what we can conclude with this facts are that there is a possibility of a probable transfer pricing adjustment. However, there is a way out of how we can defend this of not charging interest. That would be through documenting the economic rationale of not charging interest, and also if the facts are such that we can prove that it was just a stray incident and your PQR GmbH has been regular in the past of paying the overdues or the receivables, and there has been a regular recovery, that might still be workable. The only caution here is that this argument may still not be acceptable to lower tax authorities. However, there is a good chance to justify it before the appellate forums. For case study 3, the facts are that there is an entity XYZ India which has a receivable from its parent XYZ GmbH, and it has turned overdue. However, given the current COVID-19 pandemic and economic situation, XYZ India is not charging interest on delayed payments. This is also due to the reason that there is liquidity, and the financial position of XYZ GmbH is such that these delays have occurred. Now, XYZ India is also not charging interest to other non-As for similar reasons, and neither, considering the industry practice or industry scenario for the current period, even third parties are not charging interest to XYZ India. So there is a possibility that this can be again, yeah. is a possibility that charging of economic situation, charging of interest or not charging of interest is arising out of the economic situation. And given the fact that this has become an industry norm, we can again justify this fact. And here we can also provide this, that there is a consistent policy which XYZ India has followed of not charging interest to AEs or non-AEs, and we can document that. So now that brings us to the end of presentation, but now if there's still time, we can take up question. Yarisha?
Yes, sure. In case there are any questions, we can have the questions. Okay. If any other questions are there, you can just drop us an email. These are our contact details, and we will get in touch with you, particularly with these queries. That brings us to end of this session. The presentation for this session will be uploaded even on our web page, Rodelin Partner India page, as well as our LinkedIn page, and you can again go and see over there as well in case you have any other query or want these things. We will also share with you the presentation that we've already showed here, and you can refer them in case you have any such questions or queries. Again, on the next month, we also have another session which will be on changing landscapes of permanent establishment in context of agency model, construction contracts, etc. So that would be one of the more interesting topics as well. In case you have not registered yet, you can please register it. The next session will be on October 15, 2020 on same time. And yes, so great. That brings us to the end of today's session.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Stay healthy. Stay safe. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.